at the end of the First World War, it was expected that it would take around 10 years to find the remains of those who were missing in action. Just over 100 years later, in France alone, there is still around 100,000 British and Commonwealth soldiers missing, to say nothing of members of other armed forces. The task of investigating remains when they are uncovered, perhaps when a new road is built or a field is ploughed, often falls to the Commonwealth Graves Commission because they have a reputation for working quickly. And they have to be quick because when a job is being held up, the temptation for contractors and farmers is to cover over what has been found. And they have to be quick as well because sadly there are grave robbers on the lookout for cap badges and weapons, the very things the Commission needs to help identify somebody. The Commission takes great care and goes to great lengths to identify the remains, so that when the person is buried properly, they might have a name on the new grave, the right name. To give you an example of the extent of the Commission's work, I read recently of their use of DNA samples. A telephone rings in Australia, and a potential family member is told that a man whom they have never met, who may not be a direct relation, who died long ago on the other side of the world, has been found in a field where he fell. Potential families members have a great desire for a DNA match. It is as if the war, in all its electric sadness, has reached a jolting hand out of the past. You may not know it, but many weeks of the year, perhaps even this week, one soldier or more from the First World War will be buried with full military honours. And the current serving soldiers who lay them to rest treat the dead not as relics of the past, but as brothers in arms, not as if they died 100 years ago, but as if they died yesterday. They bury the dead with the same dignity as if they were burying one of their mates. But why am I telling you all this? Because this work of the Commission, in seeking out the missing from all those years ago, in identifying those who are found, in arranging for the dead to have a decent burial, and in maintaining their graves, this work, I believe, gets to the heart of what remembrance is really all about. It's about dignity. The First World War saw death on an industrial scale, a scale unseen before, and the challenge was, as it is now, to remember everyone who died in conflict with dignity. When we think of the sheer numbers, such as the figure I mentioned earlier, the 100,000 whose remains have not yet been found, it's important to remember that these figures are made up of individual lives, siblings and children, parents and spouses, people from all walks of life, people who lived and breathed as we live and breathe, people with hopes and fears, strengths and failings, loves and losses. And just as when a loved one of ours dies, we would hope that they would be buried or cremated with dignity, it is right that that same dignity is extended to those who may no longer have loved ones living, to those who would, for those who would have been laid to rest surrounded by family and friends if the war had not intervened. So when we see a war memorial, let us see the names not as a list of names from the past, but as people, each deserving dignity, not as people who might have died early last century, but as people who could have died yesterday, people we might have known, people we could have lived or worked alongside. Think of them as if they were our mates. We might think that war has very little to do with dignity, and that treating the dead with dignity when they may not have experienced much in life is a case of little, too late. Besides, the dead are in God's care now, and God brings far greater dignity to us than we show for our brothers and our sisters. Thinking again of the work of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, we might ask, why as a society do we go to all that bother to bring dignity to those who died decades ago, when there are plenty alive today who experience indignity on a daily basis? Do we have our priorities wrong somehow? Again, I would say, think of the lives of those we remember. Think of what their loved ones would have wanted for them. And one of the things they would have wanted was for their brother or their father or their husband or their child not to have died in conflict, not to have gone missing, presumed dead. And one thing they would want would be for no one else to experience the loss that they did. And perhaps the greatest dignity we can bring to those who have died in war is to do better, to redouble our efforts to work for reconciliation and peace. Every new war grave, every life cut short that we can remember should be a prompt for us to change. Because the people who die and are dying in conflicts around the world today, just like the First World War soldiers who might be buried this week, just like the names listed on war memorials up and down the country, are also people like you and me. People will say that remembrance is about many things, but at its heart it should be dignity for both the living and the dead. Amen.